Let's go a little bit deeper into the physical material parameters and see how we can achieve various effects such as metallic reflections. I'll create a new material, right-click in the graph and choose Materials, General, Physical Material. Double-click on its sample and minimize the node. And we've got the presets over here. Let's choose the silver preset. Scroll down into Metals and choose the silver preset. And in our sample, it looks kind of strange. It's almost transparent or something. Well, what's happening is it's fully reflective, and it's reflecting the background of this sample, and that sample is just a solid gray. But we can display a checker in the background. So right-click on the sample, and from the pop-up menu, choose Show Background in Preview. And now we can see we've got a sphere there that's highly reflective. Well, we could continue to work on our material using this sample, but for these types of materials especially, you're going to want to use an actual scene and develop the look of the material under real lighting conditions. So I've set that up, and I've got Active Shade all ready to go. So let's click on Active Shade on the main toolbar, and I've set that up with a very small window so that we'll update quickly. Back in the Material Editor, let's assign this to the tabletop. Click on the output and drag over to the table, release the mouse, and that assignment's been made. The silver preset gives us very shiny highlights, almost perfect mirror reflections. And that's because the Metalness parameter is at its maximum of 1. We can make a perfect first surface mirror by reducing the roughness down to its minimum of 0. And now we get perfect, sharp reflections in our active shade. Notice that our sample went away. And that's because unless you have a full license of Arnold, you cannot render samples in the Material Editor and Active Shade at the same time. The Metalness parameter fades between two different shading models. With a value of 1, it's fully metallic, and with a value of 0, it's fully non-metallic. When Metalness is 1, then the strength and color of the reflections is completely determined by the base color and the roughness. So let's investigate. I'll click on the base color swatch, and in the color selector, let's give it a hue of 0.1, press Tab, and give it a saturation of 1, its maximum, and press Enter, and now we've got a gold tabletop instead of a silver one. So we changed the base color, and that affected the reflections. But that only applies in a metalness of 1. So I'll bring the saturation back down to 0 and demonstrate. So now we're back at a white base color. Let's see what happens now if we reduce the base weight. That's essentially the same as bringing the base color down to black. So now there's no base color, but metalness is 1, and we're still getting a shiny highlight. And that's because our roughness is 0. With a metalness of 1 and a roughness of 1, we're still getting some reflections. We can see that this is not perfectly black. It's got reflections, but the reflections are kind of diffuse and spread out. For non-metallic materials, we can control the reflections a little bit more precisely. Up here there's a material mode, and it's a pull-down list. The default is simple mode. And in simple mode, the reflections are going to be controlled by the base color and the roughness. Let's switch this over to advanced. And now we get a new section down here labeled reflections. We now have a reflection weight amount and a reflection color swatch. Additionally, now if you look closely, you'll see that there are 2 roughnesses. The one that we were adjusting previously was the specular roughness. And that's now moved into the reflection section. So this is the roughness that we're used to. But there's additionally now another roughness in the base color section. That's diffuse roughness, and it's there as an additional parameter for certain types of effects such as unfinished ceramic. That doesn't really apply in this situation. What I want to show you is how to control the intensity of reflections for non-metals. So I'll bring the metalness back down to 0. And we have a reflection or specular roughness of 1, meaning a perfectly rough surface. And as I reduce the reflection weight down to 0, now we get a perfectly black surface. The base color weight is 0, the reflection weight is 0, and the metalness is also 0. The object is absorbing all of the light and reflecting none of it. Okay, well that's not usually what we want. Usually we want to adjust this reflection amount in order to just sort of dull the reflections down a bit. Let's bring the base color weight back up to 1 and maybe set the base color itself to a gray value. And let's set the reflection or specular roughness to a low value to make it pretty shiny. I'll set that to a value of 0.1 and bring the reflections back up again. And we can see that we've got some reflections there. But if they're too strong or too intense, we can adjust the weight value and bring that down to, let's say, half or so. And we've just reduced the strength of those reflections. That'll be even more obvious actually if we reduce the base color weight down to 0. And then we can see the effect of dimming the reflections only. So there's a very low reflection weight of 0.02. And there's the full reflection weight of 1. Okay, I'll set the base color weight back to 1. I'll set the reflections weight to 0.5. And now I've got the effect that I was going for, which is kind of a plastic look. Okay, that's an overview of the physical material parameters to control reflections, roughness, metalness, and the reflection weight.